What's going on, everyone? Welcome once again to another episode of Beach Sports Podcast, a podcast produced and created by the Daily 49ers staff. I'm your host, Cristian Vasquez, and thank you once again for being with us. A lot of incredible things have happened over the past 2 weeks for Long Beach State athletics, so let's get directly into it. In this episode, we will recap the week's most exciting games and results. We'll talk about a track record being broken, softball and baseball winning their respective series, the end of incredible years for both men's and women's basketball. And athletic director Andy Field will come on the show and share how he is aiding international students through the ongoing crisis in Russia and Ukraine, as well as his input on a WNBA player being detained by Russian officials. Let's start off with a quick summary of some of the week's most exciting games. Men's volleyball hosted Concordia University on Saturday, March 18th at the Walter Pyramid, sweeping the Eagles 3-0. Freshman star Alex Nikolov shined in the game and finished with his first career double-double, and sophomore libero Mason Briggs was a defensive nightmare, launching 17 errorless receptions. They will face off against UC Santa Barbara in a home-away series, first hosting the Gauchos on Friday, March 25th, before heading up the coast to Santa Barbara on Saturday, March 26th. Softball comes out big on the road against UC Riverside to start off conference play on the right foot. Starting pitcher Samantha Fowler held the Highlanders to just 2 hits and 2 runs as the Beach captured a 12-2 win, also capturing the win in a run rule victory in just 5 innings. Very impressive. They return home to start a 3-game stance against UC Davis on Saturday, March 26 at the LBSU softball complex. The Dirtbags fell to sweep Hawaii in a 3-game series, but still win their first 2 games. Their first match against the Rainbow Warriors saw starting pitcher Luis Ramirez hold Hawaii scoreless and only allow 2 hits. The Beach went on to win 4-0. In their last match, Hawaii was unstoppable through the first 3 innings, going up 3-0 and never looked back. The Dirtbags went on to lose 6-3 in the finale, snapping a 5-win streak. They will be on a 5 road game stance, facing off first against non-conference opponent Fresno State on Tuesday, March 22nd. The Long Beach State track and field team traveled to USC for the Trojan Invitational over the weekend. Women's senior captain Crystal Washington broke the women's triple jump school record on Saturday, March 19th. Fun fact, Washington now holds the school record for both indoor and outdoor seasons. Brothers Michael and Connor Phillips shined in the men's 1500-meter race. Michael Phillips won the race with a time of 3:46, while his younger brother Connor placed 3rd. The basketball season is sadly officially over. Both men and women's teams traveled to Henderson, Nevada to play at the Big West tournament at the Dollar Loan Center Arena. The women's basketball team lost in the quarterfinals of the Big West tournament, facing off against UC Davis after getting off to a slow start in the first. They would go on to get an invitation for the WNIT tournament to face off against Oregon State, where they will go on to lose 59-70. They finished their season 19-9, a very impressive year despite everything. Men's basketball went rolling through the Big West tournament. Point guard Colin Slater hit a buzzer beater at the end of the game against UC Santa Barbara to send Long Beach State to the finals. The Beach went off to face Cal State Fullerton, the winner of that, looking to go dancing. In a neck-and-neck game, the stakes were high, and the Beach and the Titans traded buckets and leads. The second half saw the Titans go off on a 3-point shooting spree, and a 7-0 run late in the game pulled Fullerton on top. A late shot by Jaydon Jones in a forced turnover gave light to the Beach, but in the last seconds, neither Slater nor Joel Murray could pull off a miracle. The Beach lost 72-71, and with that, the Big West Championship and a spot in March Madness. Our own Matthew Brown traveled to Henderson to cover the tournament, and he's here today to share that experience. So, welcome once again, Matty B. Great to have you back on the show. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Christian. Thank you so much for having me back on.
All right, Matty B. So, for those that don't know, you went to Henderson, Nevada, where the Big West tournament was being held. Tell me a little bit about the experience, man. How was it?
Yes. So it was an amazing experience. I left Thursday morning at 5 a.m. to head to Henderson because our men's first game was at 12 p.m. So I wanted to get there a little early. So I got there around 9 a.m. I made the trip, got there around 9 a.m. It was at the Dollar Loan Center in Henderson, brand new stadium. It's the first thing they kind of ever had at that stadium. It's for like the Golden Knights minor league team. But it was brand new. So it was all new everything. But the first game it was against CSU Bakersfield. The first game it was like we were kind of like coming out the gate slow. I was kind of like, shoot, are we gonna get knocked out first round? Like it was like Santa Barbara, like their offense was just like they were applying pressure early on, and like their offense was just like firing on all cylinders. So I was like a little nervous. I'm like, dang, I just come out here for one game and like we're gonna get eliminated. But by the end of that first half, it was sort of like Joel Murray, started to heat back up by the end of the first half, and they were able to settle down and carry some momentum into that second half, and they're able to come back. They went on like a couple 7-0 runs in the second half, that helped propel them to the win, and that's kind of like how the team has been the whole season. Is like they're a second half kind of team. First half they kind of like see what the offense and their defense does, and then they make adjustments for the second half. So that's definitely what they did in that first game against Bakersfield. And they're able to kind of distance themselves in the end there. I forgot what the final score was of that game. It was 72-61. So yeah, they kind of ran away with it at the end. Like all their bench players came in at the end of that game, so they were able to run away with it. But yeah, that was a good first game. And then that second game was the game everybody was talking about. It was against Santa Barbara, who was kind of the favorites, I would say, to kind of like win it all, or like the Big West Conference. They're kind of the favorites, like preseason, even still heading into the conference. Nobody even though Long Beach had the number 1 seed, nobody thought, we would go as far as we did.
Yeah. Nobody gave us a chance, honestly.
Yeah, and that's what Coach Munson, and that was basically the team mentality is like, hey, that's fine, we're the underdogs, but we'll prove everybody wrong. And that was their whole mentality the whole season. And basically this whole tournament. But yeah, that game against UC Santa Barbara, that was the crazy one because it was just back and forth. It was a seesaw battle basically the whole time. It was just like both teams were like just going on like insane runs. Like it was like Santa Barbara going to 7-0 run, and then Long Beach responded with an 8-0 run, then Santa Barbara would go on another run. So it was just like back and forth, like each team going on runs. It was pretty, yeah, it was just back and forth, I would say. And of course, in the last couple of seconds, Jaydon Jones, the freshman rookie from, Long Beach, I think Cerritos, technically, but
yeah, Cerritos.
He hit that game-winning shot. Oh my gosh, buzzer beater, 3-pointer, only 1.7 or 1.3 seconds left in the game or whatever it was. Something I didn't mention in my story, it was kind of weird. It was Long Beach had recovered the ball, right. It was like they had recovered the ball with like 15 seconds left on the other end of the court. They're running down court. And I think Coach Munson was trying to call timeout, like as soon as they recovered the ball, but I don't think anybody heard him. And they called timeout when Long Beach got down to the other end of the court, and Munson was mad because he was like, I didn't want to call a timeout right now. I wanted to call a timeout earlier when there was like 10 seconds left. Now there's only 1.3 seconds left. But
when it comes down to the wire, every second counts.
Yeah, every second counts. So Munson was a little unhappy to kind of call timeout a little late there.
Yeah.
And I was like, because everybody was in the stadium was like, why would you call a timeout with 1 point whatever seconds left with your right at the rim? But yeah, it was just, and Munson said that it was Drew Cobb inbounded to Jones. They said that was the first time they've ever ran that kind of play. Cobb to Jones. But it worked out, and if you read the article, it was during that timeout with 1.7 second or 1.3 seconds left. Jones hadn't taken a shot the whole second half, and he just said to coach, he was like, if I get it, it's going in, and he didn't lie, it went in. One thing I would say that kind of stood out in that game for me, it was sort of like a little moment, but it was like a big picture kind of moment. Joel Murray, he was having a slow offensive night. It was like he only scored like 7 points, I think, the whole game, which is, pretty unusual for him. But I know I did an article, a feature story on him, like right before the tournament started. And everybody said like, he's the hardest, he works harder than almost anybody, or he does work harder than anybody on the team. And there was one moment in that game, he was Murray is 6 foot, like 6 foot even. And he was guarding this guy in UC Santa Barbara. He was 6'9". And like this guy, he puts his hands up, he's reaching well over 7 feet,
Oh yeah.
And at one moment it was like second half, like, Murray's having a slow night. And like someone passed it down court to this, huge guy. And Murray jumped up. He jumped up so high. I don't think I've ever seen anybody like jump that high, like that quick. And like, he just like blocked the pass. And like, he just like hit the ground so hard. And you could tell it hurt, but he got right back up and like went to go play defense. And I was like, oh my gosh, like he does play harder than like anybody on this court. Like, Colin Slater might be like, the player of the year, but it's like, it's naturally talented. He's naturally gifted like that. Like it's like that, Murray's an embodiment of that saying, it's like people might be more talented than you, but there's no excuse for them to like out, work you or out hustle you, and he was kind of like the embodiment of that. So yeah, that to get to the championship game, it was just a crazy night. Jones hits that game walk-off, buzzer beater shot. It was just an insane game. Colin Slater had like 25 points as well that game. He was just going off.
And it looked like Slater was going to get that. They were going to try intending for Slater to take that last shot. But, I mean, he was guarded very well by the Gauchos. So
exactly. Well, that was probably a smart thing to do. So that's why Jones was left wide open for that pass. Yeah. So it was definitely, caught him off guard, and able to go to the championship and knock off, pretty much the favorites to go to the championship. Mm-hmm. So it was a pretty wild night. But yeah, so then the championship game came around. What was that? Saturday? That was Saturday.
That was Saturday night. Yeah.
Saturday night, 8:30. It was that game was just like, I was like, oh, the Santa Barbara game could have been the championship game. But then the Fullerton game, oh my gosh, it was just back and forth. It was just like, it was like a physical, like I would say a physical game. It was just like everybody was just like on each other, defense the whole way. Like, it was like everyone was trying to play hard defense. So like the offense, kind of like, it was like wild. It was like wild, like scrappy to me. Everybody was just like trying to shoot the ball, like, just try to get off as many threes as they can. But Long Beach, we got off to a pretty good like offensive start, which is unusual for the team. We usually come out slow offensively, but against Fullerton, I noticed we had come out like hot. Like, we're like at one point we had a 14-point lead in the first half, which is kind of unusual for the team. We're usually the score all those points in the second half. So yeah, we had that 14-point lead, but then Fullerton just started coming on runs and like able to chip away, and then it took like a couple point lead, I think, going into the, halftime. So it was definitely, kind of disheartening, or like to lose all that momentum going into the second half. But coming out in the second half, it was basically the same thing. Like I said, scrappy. It was just like all defense. Everybody's like, I feel like everybody's just like panicking, not panicking, but it's like a sense of urgency going on, like everyone's like, oh my God, like this is the championship game.
And in that first half too, they lost Abubakar Traore. He fell down.
Yeah,
I know he was out for the first half.
Yeah, he went out. It was a pretty awkward injury. He like fell on the back of somebody and like fell. It was like a pretty awkward injury. So that was definitely rough. He definitely helps on like getting rebounds. He's a rebound specialist. So that definitely hurt the Beach. And what hurt the Beach as well is Slater kind of sat down in the first half, because he wanted to avoid, he wanted to get a little rest, but avoid fouling out, so I think it picked up 2 fouls in the half, or maybe even 3, honestly. So Coach Munson wanted to, kind of sit him to avoid fouling out.
Yeah.
And that's when like Fullerton, once he sat out, Fullerton started coming back, right away, chipping away, they're, our best offensive players kind of off the court. So they were able to get some momentum back in that first half. But yeah, and then after the halftime, it was just like 3-point galore. Like everybody was shooting threes.
Yeah.
And Fullerton, they're like one of the worst teams, like from the 3-point line. So like they were just thinking threes though. They made their first 6 shots, like their first 6 attempts. They made it. It was just like, I was like, oh my gosh. So I feel like that definitely put a little pressure, because I felt like we would try to respond with threes rather than, maybe get going with the 2s, and just rebound and like keep going, I felt like we were trying to like respond with threes and we just like kind of kept missing some. And yeah, there were I mean, it was back and forth. There were like 9 lead changes in the game. So, I mean, we were in it, but like, so the whole time we're like, this game is going to come down to the wire. We all knew, everybody in the same, we were like, this is going to come down to the last couple of seconds. Like, this game is way too close, and like the whole time, like, it's like Jaydon Jones hits that 3 to make it 72-71. We're down by 1 point, then they get the ball back with, 20 seconds left. I run to the sidelines, I'm ready to run on the court because I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going to like hit another buzzer beater, go to March Madness, So I go on the sidelines with a bunch of people from like Long Beach's marketing department. And we're just sitting there and we're like, oh my gosh, like this is like, we're going to do it. And like, they got the ball back with 20 seconds left and came down the court. But, if you watch the game, you saw nobody really could get a shot off. They were passing it around, but it was like, I understand why they didn't take the shots at times, but it was just like, you got to take the shot off. You got to get at least the shot off there, You never know. Like when the game ended, I was just like speechless. I was like, oh my gosh, like that's it. Like we didn't get a shot. Like, I was a little shocked. I was a little stunned, But yeah, it was just a crazy, crazy atmosphere. I mean, Fullerton, they outlasted us, even they said they're like, it came down to the wire, it was like, it was just, I think one of the players from Fullerton was like, we did nothing special. It was just, it's kind of like, it could have been them, it was like, 1 point, they both played their hearts out. Yeah. So it was definitely a great, great series overall.
And watching it at home, same thing. I had the same reaction. You had a better view, obviously, because you were there. But, just sitting at home and watching, I'm like, man, this is definitely going to come down to the wire. You already knew it straight off the bat, like you said. It's one of those games where it's just too intense. It's too intense to just end there.
Yeah, it's definitely a sour ending. Even Coach Munson after the game, he was just like, I'm kind of bummed we didn't get the shot off. It's like, that's all I can say is like you just need to get the shot off there, and he credit credit to Fullerton. They did put a lot of pressure in those last couple of seconds on everybody, and held us shotless. But yeah, Coach Munson was the only one who came out post game. They usually came out with players, but yeah, you could tell he was still a little upset. It's a hard talk. It's a hard loss. You guys you're 1 point away from going to March Madness, or 2 points, I guess.
Yeah. Another thing I should mention is, I saw the defense that we were playing against Fullerton. We were doing a lot of zone defense, and it worked for a minute. But you could see the Titans were starting to catch up on how to work their offense against it. And I think that's also where it kind of like slipped up, where that zone defense just kind of like failed, and next thing you know, they're shooting, through everywhere. They're able to get inside the paint, and I mean, it's just kind of like fell apart for us there.
Yeah, exactly. And Munson even kind of said that, I even asked him, or someone asked him, they kind of put pressure on early, you said, like, they put pressure on early and, got off to a good lead. And Munson said, that's kind of one of the worst things that could happen, because you get up to such an early lead and like the little things start, not mattering as much. And, it's like, oh, we're at such a big lead, the little things, we don't have to do this or work, hustle as hard, and then it just starts, the Fullerton just starts coming back like that. And that kind of killed them. And the small things kind of killed them.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was very unfortunate. We would have gotten to play Duke, which would have been we would have definitely been the underdog, like the big underdogs. But it would have been a great game. I would feel like
that's a real David and Goliath right there.
Yeah, exactly. That would have been very
Duke team against us. It's I mean, we haven't been back to March Madness since 2012, and
yeah, exactly.
It would have been great. Even had we not won that game, right? It still would have been amazing to just see that Long Beach.
Yeah, made it to March Madness. Made it to the national, like championship tournament.
But I mean,
we had to settle for the NIT tournament against BYU right yesterday on Wednesday. I was covering the Dirtbags game, but I saw we unfortunately lost as well. I don't know. Were you watching that game or?
I did not, but I mean, it just seemed like we were on the losing end on that one, and it was a lot. It was a big margin too. So.
And I saw we were winning at the half too. or we had a lead in the half. We had a pretty good lead going into the half. So it's just, I guess, I don't know. We're mostly a second. That's how the whole season we've been a second half team, but these past 2 games they try to be the first half team, and it looks like it, kind of didn't work out.
Yeah. And I mean, second half is where you got to win the games,
Exactly.
It's good to get a comfortable lead at the first half, but I mean, it all comes down to the wire, especially in tight games like that. Second half matters.
Exactly. That's why the game's not over at the half. You still got to play a whole another half.
Yeah. So, any final thoughts, Matt, on an incredible basketball season that the men's team had?
Yeah, I mean, it was just they got they have a lot of great players. They're going to have a couple of seniors leaving. They have Murray. I've asked him if he's coming back. He has 1 more year of eligibility. He hasn't given a definitive answer. But I assume he's going to be back. I assume he's going to be back. But this team, I mean, even though they lost, in the championship game in the NIT tournament, they should be proud of themselves. They had a very great season and a great turnaround to their season. Mm-hmm. Right before conference started, they had like a 3-7 record. They were picked to finish 8th in the conference. Nobody thought this team would do anything, and they came in. They turned their season around after basically winter break. Got the number 1 seed in the tournament. Made it the championship game. Almost won. So yeah, this season, even though it kind of ended pretty sour, I wouldn't call it a disappointment, and Coach Munson definitely wouldn't call it a disappointment either.
Not at all. There shouldn't be a reason why it should be called disappointment.
Yeah, especially these past couple of years, basketball has had some issues with their culture and players. I wouldn't say issues, but with their record. But yeah, this team, it's definitely turned the culture around for this team. This team has definitely turned the culture around for LBSU basketball.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's going to be good to see a bunch of these amazing players come back next season, and I think they're only going to build up from here.
Exactly. Jaydon Jones, Abubakar Traore. They're freshmen. They made it 1 game away from March Madness. So
we still got
this
at least
experience,
2 years of this.
Yeah, exactly. We still got a long more time of this. I would say dynasty or run they're going to have these next couple years.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for coming on and telling us about your experience.
Of course. Thank you so much. It was, a great experience, in Henderson. It wasn't exactly, I was about 40 minutes away from Vegas. So it wasn't, I thought I was saying it was going to be a Vegas trip, but it was a Henderson trip.
But it was worth it.
Yeah, it was worth it. It was worth it.
All right, Matty B. Thank you so much, my man.
All right. Thank you for having me. I'll talk to you later.
A big thank you to Matthew Brown for coming on the show once again and sharing the ups and downs of what was the Big West tournament. It's important to mention, following the conclusion of the game against Fullerton, that a death threat began circulating social media, particularly against Colin Slater. Long Beach State Athletic Director Andy Fee had this to say about the situation.
Well, I can't. There's an ongoing investigation right now, and with an ongoing investigation, I can't comment on that. That investigation will play out, and we'll just have to wait till the final pieces are put in place.
Right.
But what I would say is, threats of any kind, whether it's to a student athlete or a student or a faculty member, obviously those are things that we are very cognizant of, very aware of. And, the first thing we want to do is protect our student athletes, coaches, and staff. So, we will always do those things to make sure people are safe. And like I said, there's an ongoing investigation right now. And I think that will play out, and hopefully that will end up with, a good result.
Last month, WNBA player Brittney Griner was detained by Russian officials in Moscow of alleged drug charges after a vape cartridge was found in her luggage. We at the Daily 49er wanted to know how our school would handle such a case. We spoke to athletic director Andy Fee to find out.
Yeah, well, the NCAA, marijuana is a banned substance. And if you test positive, if the NCAA tests you and you test positive, it's a year suspension. So it's pretty significant. And, if we were to get a positive test, or someone were, arrested, at customs or something like that, there would definitely be repercussions for that. I guess it depends on the exact scenario, but, even though it's legal in the state of California, the NCAA has it as a banned substance, so we have to deal with it a little more differently, I guess is how I would describe it.
Now, with the ongoing political situation in Russia, we have a lot of international athletes, a lot of athletes in our rosters that are from places like Russia. How are you helping athletes through the hardships that are going outside of athletics?
Yeah, so obviously the Russian Ukrainian situation is just terrible, and we have 2 Russian student athletes in our athletic department, and we've been offering them services if they want to talk to somebody. We've been checking in on them to make sure that they feel supported. They're just 2 student athletes who are here to study and to play sports, and they're not involved in any of this. I think there's a lot of vitriol out there about Russia, and certainly what Russia is doing, invading into Ukraine, I certainly disagree with. But in terms of our student athletes, again, they're here to study, here to play sports, and I know it's very trying on them. So we've been offering them those resources that they can get counseling, again, talk to somebody, as well as teammates, coaches, and staff checking in on them to make sure they're doing okay.
For sure. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Andy Fee, for coming once again and speaking to us on the podcast.
Cristian, always appreciate it. Look forward to our next discussion.
Thank you, sir. That is all for this episode of Beach Sports. Tune in next time for more sports news, recaps, and scores. Big shout outs to sports editor assistant Matthew Brown and to athletic director Andy Fee for coming on today's episode. Don't forget to check out Beach News Weekly for more campus news on daily49er.com, as well as other podcast content brought to you by the Daily 49er. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Daily 49er. Thank you so much for being with us today. I've been your host, Cristian Vasquez. Until next time.